Alicia stood at the edge of the craggy cliff, her towering form casting a long shadow over the valley below. Her skin shimmered like molten silver under the twin suns, muscles rippling with every subtle movement. She was a walking nightmare to anyone who dared to cross her path, a living legend of destruction. For years she had roamed the galaxy, the last of her warrior tribe, feared by every race she encountered. Her beauty was terrifying. Her strength was unmatched. But in her own mind, all she was alone. Too much of everything, too monstrous to ever find love. And the endless admiration of warriors who fell at her feet only reminded her of the one thing she could never have: companionship. Love. The kind of affection that didn't come with fear. "You are a goddess," the last one had said before leaving, crawling away with his tail tucked between his legs. It was a compliment, but Alicia didn't need a goddamn pedestal. She needed someone to look past her size, her power, her battle-worn exterior, and see her. And that, she knew, was impossible. As she brooded on her latest failed attempt at connection, a small object zipping through the sky caught her attention. Her sharp gaze tracked it until it crash-landed on the outskirts of the valley. A spaceship. The kind of ship that typically didn't land in her neck of the woods. No one came to visit. Not unless they were fools or bounty hunters. Either way, she was ready for either. Striding down the rocky slope, her footfalls causing the earth to tremble slightly, she arrived at the wreckage in minutes. A small, unimpressive spacecraft, crashed and smoking in the middle of an open field. She leaned down, peering into the broken hull, her powerful hands reaching inside, pulling out what appeared to be a human. Alicia recoiled, momentarily stunned by the sight. She had expected a warrior, a pirate, or a merchant, but instead, the human was, well, underwhelming. His skin was pale, his frame barely reaching her waist, and he had the nerve to be unconscious in front of her. She scoffed. He looked soft. Fragile. His mouth was slack, a dumb expression on his face. He was pathetic, like all the other weaklings who thought they could impress her. Yet there was something oddly familiar about him. He looked like someone who had no concept of danger, a trait that should have irked her, but didn't. Maybe it was the stupid grin on his face even as he lay there. She threw him to the ground, watching him bounce and roll awkwardly, his arms flailing in the air as he scrambled to get up. "Hey! You didn't have to throw me like that!" He coughed, glaring up at her with a mixture of confusion and, was that admiration? He was acting like she wasn't the terrifying alien she was. As if she were just another human he could joke around with. She crossed her arms over her chest, her voice deep and booming. "Who are you, little human? And why are you on my land?" "Little?" he scoffed, standing up, brushing himself off. "You're about 1,000 feet tall, and you're calling me little?" She tilted her head, feeling a strange stirring in her chest at his brashness. Nobody talked to her like that. No one. "You're..." She paused, trying to find the right words. "You're lucky I don't crush you for your insolence." He waved her off with a dismissive hand. "I'm just on vacation, lady. Not exactly sure where I am, but from the looks of it, I'm about to be crushed by a muscle-bound Amazonian goddess, so maybe I should have just stayed in orbit." "Vacation?" She narrowed her eyes, confused. "What is this vacation you speak of? No one comes to my world unless they're here to die." "Well, that's comforting. But I'm not exactly the dying type," he said with a grin, trying to stand a little taller as if to prove something. Alicia snorted. "What are you, some kind of fool?" "Pretty much," he said, glancing around. "But a fool who's not afraid of a tall, scary alien lady who could probably snap him like a twig, right? How's that for bravery?" Alicia blinked, her mind racing. She was so used to fear, to being seen as a monster, that this casual, almost flippant attitude was throwing her off. No one looked at her like he did. Most people ran for the hills, stammering apologies as they begged for their lives. Yet here was this human, making jokes. And it was oddly refreshing. Her chest tightened, and she hated herself for it. "You amuse me, human," she said, her voice still low, but no longer laced with the threat she had initially carried. "But I don't think you understand the danger you're in." He shrugged. "Hey, you haven't crushed me yet, so I'm guessing we're past that, right?" Alicia stared at him, her gaze intense, her mind racing to figure out how to handle this situation. There was something strange about him. Something she couldn't put her finger on. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't awestruck by her strength. He wasn't even intimidated by her size. Instead, he seemed fascinated, amused, and oddly charmed. She couldn't tell if he was genuinely brave or just incredibly stupid. "You're annoying," she grumbled, unable to decide whether to throw him back into the wreckage or keep him around for the sheer novelty of his company. "What is it you want here, human? You don't belong." "Actually, I came here to not belong," he said, winking at her. "I needed a place where no one would bother me, and hey, look what I found. An intimidating 10-foot-tall warrior lady who might be my best chance at an adventure." Her jaw clenched. "You are infuriating." "You sure?" He raised an eyebrow. "You look like you're having fun. I mean, that was some pretty impressive throwing me across the field technique. 10 out of 10 for strength." Alicia wanted to strangle him. But then she saw it. The little glimmer in his eyes. The challenge. He wasn't afraid of her. And for some reason that made her want to crack a smile, though she fought it with all her might. "Enough with the jokes," she growled. "You think I'm some kind of joke, don't you?" He paused, giving her a more serious look. "No. I think you're probably the most fascinating thing I've ever met." "Fascinating?" She raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." He leaned in closer, his voice lowering, as if sharing a secret. "I'm not afraid of you. But you don't scare me either. And that's kind of the thing, isn't it? You're all tough, but you're still a person. A beautiful, strong, badass person who's more than just her size." Alicia froze. His words hit her in a way she wasn't ready for. She wasn't just a monster. She wasn't just her size, her power. She wasn't just a weapon. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone had looked at her and seen something more. And it terrified her. But despite herself, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She pulled him out of the wreckage, her fingers grasping his torso with a tenderness that seemed foreign to her. The human was unconscious, his body limp and ragged. She could feel his pulse beneath her hand, weak, but still there. Alicia cursed under her breath. She didn't have time for this. She had no patience for this kind of thing. Humans were fragile, useless little creatures. She could barely stand them, let alone have one thrown into her path like this. Still, he was alive. And for some reason, she didn't want him to die on her watch. With a grunt, she scooped him up in her massive arms, holding him against her chest. Her sharp, alien senses noted his scent, earthy, like an underbrush after rain. Oddly comforting. For a moment, she wondered why she didn't feel repulsed. But then again, she felt nothing for any of the warriors who had courted her over the years. Why would this human be any different? As she carried him through the rugged terrain, her mind raced. Humans were supposed to be weak, insignificant. They were pests, like rats scurrying around the galaxies. But here in her hands one of them felt vulnerable. She wasn't used to seeing something so breakable. Her lips curled into a scowl. It wasn't like she cared. It wasn't like she wanted to care. The universe was a cruel place. And love? That was a joke. A distant concept that made her sick. By the time she found shelter in a nearby cave, the human was beginning to stir. His eyelids fluttered open, and the first thing he saw was her face, towering above him, her glowing skin casting an eerie light over the rocky walls. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and then, without missing a beat, he grinned up at her. "Whoa," he said, voice hoarse. "I knew I was going to get lucky on this trip, but I didn't think the vacation package came with this." Alicia froze. Did he just flirt with her? She didn't know whether to laugh or snap his neck for his audacity. She stared down at him, her arms still holding him effortlessly against her chest. He was tiny in comparison, his body probably weighing the same as one of her biceps. His human face was framed by a wild mess of dark hair, eyes twinkling with mischief. He was absurdly cute. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt something stir deep inside her chest. "What did you say?" she growled, her voice low, warning him that this was not a game. The human's grin only widened, unfazed by her towering presence. "I'm not complaining. Not every day you get rescued by a giant alien babe." He chuckled, clearly enjoying her discomfort. "No need to be shy, sweetheart. I can already tell you've got it going on." Alicia's eyes narrowed. Was he making fun of her? She wasn't used to this. No one ever made light of her before, at least not to her face. Most people were terrified of her, not amused by her appearance. "I'm not, sweetheart," she bit out, trying to keep her temper in check. "I'm not a babe." "Oh, come on, big girl," he quipped, his grin widening. "Sure you are. Look, if you wanted to impress me with your size, mission accomplished." She snarled, tightening her grip on him slightly, but not enough to harm him. He just laughed, as though he were enjoying every second of this. "I wasn't trying to impress you," she said, her voice cold. "I'm here to keep you alive." "Ah, sure you are. That's sweet." He winked, and then winced as his hand instinctively reached for his ribs. "Still, can't help but notice I'm not dead yet. Not sure if you're a terrifying monster or just really good at playing nurse." Nurse asterisk? She repeated, an eyebrow shooting up. "I'm not some. I don't know what you think I am, but I don't do nursing. You are nothing but a weak human, and I am saving your life because I don't want your pathetic existence to end so soon." His expression softened for a moment, but the grin never left his face. "I'm just saying, nursing could be fun. I'm sure you've got plenty of practice. I mean, with all that strength and—" He motioned vaguely to her towering frame, obviously taking in every inch of her. Alicia rolled her eyes, resisting the urge to roll him off her lap. Her patience was wearing thin, but somehow, she was finding it hard to stay angry. In fact, this was the first time in a long time that someone had actually made her feel something other than annoyance. Maybe it was the absurdity of his comments. Maybe it was the way he seemed so comfortable with her, as if her size and strength were irrelevant. "Are you always this forward with people you don't know?" she asked, her tone flat but tinged with genuine curiosity. He shrugged, wincing slightly as he adjusted himself against the cave wall. "Hey, if I'm gonna die on this alien planet, I may as well go out with a smile. Besides, I'm a big fan of directness. Saves time." His eyes met hers again, and this time there was something different in them. Something that made Alicia pause. "So, what's your deal, big girl? You're clearly not like anyone I've met. You seem all tough, but I can tell there's more to you than just muscles." For a brief moment, Alicia wanted to tear his head off for his presumptuous words. She didn't need anyone to see past her muscles. She had spent her whole life making sure people feared her strength and size. But this human, this idiot, he wasn't afraid of her. And maybe that was what grated on her nerves the most. "Don't ever assume you know anything about me, human," she said, her voice colder now, even though she could feel her pulse quickening. It was a strange feeling, this unease that was starting to bubble inside her. He just smiled, completely unfazed. All right. Keep the mystery, babe. But don't pretend like you don't secretly love the attention." He winked again. The audacity. Her teeth clenched, but for some strange reason, she didn't feel the overwhelming desire to crush him. Instead, she found herself, almost, amused. "To wake up in some weird alien place, but damn, you are really tall. Like freakishly tall. You a superhero or something?" Alicia blinked, staring down at the human in confusion. She had half expected him to scream or cower, but this? This was ridiculous. He was flirting with her? Or was it a joke? Her brow furrowed, and for a moment, she was tempted to crush him for his insolence. But then she remembered, he was alive, and she wasn't in the mood to deal with any more death. For now, he had a pass. but just barely. You think I'm a superhero? She growled, her voice low, like the rumble of a thunderstorm. She flexed her massive arm, watching him squint up at her unfazed. Not think, the human said, eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. I know you are. I mean, come on, you've got the whole tall, dark, and terrifying thing down to a science. Must be a lot of neck pain, though. Alicia's lips curled, her irritation giving way to a reluctant chuckle. What was it with this human? He was either incredibly brave or just plain stupid. Probably both. You're not afraid of me? She asked, crossing her arms and towering over him, blocking out what little light filtered into the cave. Afraid? Nah, he replied with a grin that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. I've been in worse situations. Plus, you don't look like you want to squish me. Maybe just, hug me to death, but squish? Nah. Alicia stared at him, dumbfounded. This human had no concept of how dangerous she was. Or maybe he was just so confident that he thought he could charm his way out of anything. Either way, he wasn't running. He wasn't cowering. He was just casually bantering with her like she was any other woman. Not a warrior, not a killer, not a living legend. Just another person. She couldn't decide whether it was infuriating or kind of refreshing. Who are you, human? She asked, her tone softer now, but still tinged with suspicion. Jay, he said, his grin widening. But you can call me whatever you want. I'm open to suggestions. Tall girl has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Alicia rolled her eyes. Jay. Of course. A human name that meant absolutely nothing to her. But she'd play along. For now. Well, Jay, since you're so brave, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, how about you tell me what you're doing here? Because if you think you can just wander into my territory… I wasn't wandering, Jay interrupted with a shrug. More like crash landing. Pretty sure my ship's toast. You're welcome to take a look, but don't expect any miracles. It's not exactly SpaceX-grade technology. Alicia stared at him, bewildered by his lack of concern. His ship was destroyed, he had no way of getting home, and yet here he was, cracking jokes about it like it was just another Tuesday. She wasn't used to this. Most beings who came across her were terrified, begging for their lives or offering her gold, jewels, or some pathetic token of admiration. But not this guy. He was practically treating her like an oversized joke. And what about you? He continued, not noticing her growing frustration. What's a gorgeous giantess like you doing out here all alone? Got some giant alien lovers to keep you company, or are you a free agent? Alicia's patience snapped. She wasn't some gigantic alien stripper or whatever he thought she was. I don't need your jokes, human, she said, her voice like a whip, cutting through the air. I've had enough of them in my lifetime. Jay's grin faltered for a split second before he gave her an exaggerated, innocent look. Hey, I wasn't joking about that part. I mean, come on, you've got the whole dangerous, mysterious, beautiful vibe going on. That's practically an invitation for guys to come knocking. What's the deal, though? You just playing hard to get? Alicia's eyes narrowed. I don't play games, Jay, she said, every word a warning. And I certainly don't need anyone. Her tone was sharp, and for a moment she felt something raw inside her, a stab of loneliness, something she refused to acknowledge. The truth was, no one had ever seen her, not really. They saw her size, her power, her strength, but not her. Not the woman underneath all that. And Jay's inability to take her seriously, his insistence on treating her like she was some kind of joke, struck a nerve. It was the last thing she needed. The last thing she wanted. But instead of retreating, instead of turning away like everyone else, Jay just smirked. Well, alright then. You don't need anyone, huh? But I gotta tell ya, that sounds like some serious defensive talk. Like I've been hurt before and I'm not letting anyone in again. You're not fooling me. You just need someone who doesn't make you feel like an unapproachable alien warrior goddess, but like a regular person. Not a hard thing to figure out, right? Alicia froze, the sting of his words landing harder than she expected. He was right. She wasn't fooling anyone. She wasn't just some warrior. She was just lonely. But the idea of being seen for who she truly was? It scared her more than anything else in the universe. She gritted her teeth, not sure if she wanted to punch him or kiss him. He was infuriating, and yet, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of something else, something warmer, something unfamiliar. "You're annoying," she muttered, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Yep. Annoyingly good-looking, right?" Jay replied unabashed, sending a wink her way that made her heart do an unexpected flip. Alicia didn't know how to respond. She didn't know what she wanted from this ridiculous human, but something inside her stirred. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, Jay wasn't the fool she'd initially thought. Maybe he was something more. Something dangerous. "Look, I'm not gonna bite you," she muttered, though the words sounded more like a question than a statement. "But you should really learn to be more careful around, well, me. You don't get to walk around cracking jokes at things that can break your bones like twigs." Jay grinned wider, completely unfazed by her warning. "You mean like this?" He stood up slowly, stretching his arms dramatically as if showing off. "Guess I'll just have to trust the giant alien lady won't squash me by accident. Or, intentionally." His eyes twinkled with mischief. Alicia's gaze narrowed, her expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. She was used to intimidating others, alien species, warriors, even kings, but this human? He was unflappable. Every word he spoke felt like a challenge, but not in the way she was accustomed to. There was no fear, no wariness in his voice. Just amusement. Her enormous muscles, her towering height, none of it fazed him. And that was starting to bother her. "Why are you so casual?" she demanded, her voice rough with frustration. "Why not? You're clearly a badass. I'm just here to admire the view." He gestured to her towering form with a smirk. "Though, between you and me, I think you could stand to lighten up a little. I mean, you're 10 feet of pure badassery, but you're acting like you've never been told you've got a nice smile." Alicia scowled, her mind racing. He couldn't possibly be serious. No one had ever said anything like that to her. It wasn't that she lacked a sense of humor. It was just that most people feared her too much to even joke. Her tribe had been warriors, honor-bound, focused only on strength and conquest. There was no room for things like humor or tenderness in their code. She had been raised to believe that. But this human, he didn't seem to care. And it made her feel things she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "You really think that about me?" she asked, her voice lower, more tentative. The words felt strange, like a foreign language on her tongue. Jay shrugged, still looking at her like she was just another person, not some intimidating force of nature. "I don't know. You've got this thing about you. Like, yeah, you could snap me like a twig, but you don't. And that makes you kinda cool in my book." Alicia's chest tightened, the unexpected compliment catching her off guard. For a moment, she forgot to scowl. She hadn't expected him to say that, let alone in such a casual, nonchalant way. She wasn't used to people seeing her as anything but a weapon, a force of nature. Never as a person. And certainly never as someone who could be cool. But as the seconds ticked by, the uncomfortable feeling inside her grew. She had no idea what to do with it. This human was throwing her entire world off balance. "So what now?" Jay's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone light, but there was a flicker of curiosity behind it. "I mean, you've got me stuck here, so might as well make the best of it. You can keep trying to intimidate me, or you could maybe show me around?" "Show you around?" Alicia repeated, a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest. It was harsh, almost bitter, but still, there was a hint of something else in it. "You think I'm going to give you a tour? You think you deserve one?" Jay's face lit up, the kind of expression that usually meant trouble. "Well, you did save me from that wreckage, right? So maybe you're not all bad. Besides, what's the harm in showing me around? I promise I won't try to flirt with you again." I'm sure you've got enough suitors trying to win your affection. I'm just here for the views and the company. His grin widened at the last part, clearly trying to test her limits. Alicia raised an eyebrow, the edge of her lips twitching into a small, reluctant smile. Company? She asked, her voice still low but with a touch of amusement. You really think a warrior like me needs company? I'm a one-woman army. I don't need anything from anyone. Hey, maybe I need company. Jay shot back quickly. You'd be surprised how lonely it can get floating around space by yourself. At least you've got this whole vibe going on. He gestured at her again, like she was a museum exhibit. I mean, damn, if I had arms like that, I'd probably just spend all day flexing in the mirror. A laugh escaped Alicia before she could stop it, and the sound surprised her. It was low, deep, and genuine, more of a chuckle than the scoff she had expected. There it was again, something about this human made her feel lighter, less heavy with the weight of her isolation. Flexing in the mirror, huh? She teased, her mood shifting, if only slightly. Is that what you think I do in my free time? Jay nodded with exaggerated seriousness. Absolutely. I mean, you've got to have some downtime, right? All that crushing enemies and looking like you could break me in half must get exhausting. You need to unwind somehow. Alicia found herself laughing again, a real laugh, one that made her stomach tighten. She hadn't laughed like this in ages, and it felt good. Weirdly good. The human had a way of making her forget her own damn rules. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a monster. She felt like a woman, with all the messy, confusing emotions that came with it. Maybe there was something to this human after all. You're infuriating, she muttered, half to herself. But I suppose I could show you around. A little bit. Just don't get in my way. Jay gave her a mock salute, and with that, the tension between them began to dissolve. She didn't know what it was about him, but something about his presence made her start to reconsider everything she thought she knew about herself. And that was a problem. But not a problem she was ready to solve just yet.